Okay, so you want to own Airbnb, not a hotel chain, not a single building. $91 billion in gross booking value moved through your platform last year. 533 million nights and experiences got booked. 8 million active listings, 5 million hosts in more than 220 countries and regions. And you own none of it. Not one bed, not one lock, not 1 square foot. You're not buying real estate. You're buying the moment a stranger decides to trust another stranger's spare room, and you collect a fee for standing in the middle of that decision. It sounds even lighter than owning a ride-hailing app. At least a car has an engine. A listing is just a photograph and a promise. It is not simple. And the first place it gets complicated is the same place it always gets complicated: the years before it worked. For most of its life as a public company, Airbnb lost money getting here. A net loss of $352 million in 2021 alone, on top of years of losses before that, most of them long before anyone had heard the word pandemic. Then, in 2022, the platform posted its first profitable full year in company history. $1.9 billion in net income, revenue up 40% to $8.4 billion. Here's the part that doesn't make it into the headline, even after that. Even after 3 straight profitable years, Airbnb's accumulated deficit, the running scoreboard of every dollar it has ever made or lost since the company existed, was still more than $4 billion in the red at the end of 2024. Profitable years don't erase the hole, they just slow how fast it fills back in. Now the good part: you survived the hole. Here's how the money works today. The industry term is the same one you'd use for any platform: take rate. Revenue divided by gross booking value. In 2025, gross booking value was $91.3 billion. Revenue was $12.24 billion. Divide one into the other, and you land at roughly 13.5%. 13.5 cents of every dollar that flows through 100 million strangers deciding to stay in each other's homes. And it works. Net income of $2.5 billion. Adjusted EBITDA of $4.3 billion, a 35% margin. Free cash flow of $4.6 billion, a 38% margin. Run by a company with about 8,000 employees. That's the headline number. Now look underneath it, because this is where the story gets genuinely interesting. And it's happening on a deadline you can check yourself. For most of Airbnb's history, that 13.5% was actually 2 separate numbers stitched together. Most hosts paid a small host fee, around 3% of the booking. Guests paid a much larger guest fee on top, usually somewhere between 14 and 16.5%, added at checkout. 2 fees, 2 payers, 1 platform collecting both ends. Starting in the back half of 2025, Airbnb began retiring that structure. Hosts connected through professional management software were moved automatically onto what the company calls the host-only fee. 1 fee, roughly 15.5%, taken entirely out of the host's payout. No guest fee added at checkout at all. By October of 2025, that switch was mandatory for every professional host on the platform. Individual hosts came next, market by market, on published deadlines running through the back half of 2026. Read that again because it's easy to miss what actually happened. The total amount the platform collects per booking barely moved. What moved is who pays it and who sees it happen. Under the old structure, a host looked at their dashboard and saw 3%, a small, easy number to live with. Under the new structure, that same host sees 15.5% come off the top every single time because the guest side fee didn't disappear. It got folded in and moved to the other side of the ledger. Airbnb's own documentation says it plainly. To keep the same payout you had before, raise your price by roughly 18%. And here's the part that makes it a genuinely elegant piece of platform design instead of just a fee hike. From the guest side, the price at checkout looks lower and more honest. No surprise fee appearing at the last screen. Just one number, all in right from the search results. Airbnb has told the market this improves conversion. More bookings finish. Fewer guests abandon the cart at the fee reveal. Same platform, same roughly 15%. But the host absorbs the sticker shock that used to belong to the guest, and the guest experiences a platform that finally feels transparent. That's the trapdoor. It isn't hidden in fine print. It's sitting in a public rollout calendar, and it is still actively happening as you're hearing this. The take rate is the floor. It's not the whole building. The first expansion is experiences, tours, and classes and activities hosted by locals, a category Airbnb has relaunched and pushed harder since 2024. The second is services, a 2025 launch, 10,000 vendors across 260 cities offering everything from photography to spa treatments to personal training, all running through the same booking engine and the same fee logic as a bedroom. In 2026, Airbnb added independent boutique hotels and car rentals to the app entirely. The company's own framing for where this goes is blunt. Its CEO has said the goal is to become, in his words, an Amazon for travel, dozens or eventually hundreds of categories, all funneled through one app that increasingly runs on AI agents booking on your behalf instead of you scrolling listings yourself. Notice the pattern. Every new category rides the same rails that were built to rent out spare bedrooms. The marginal cost of adding a massage therapist to the platform is close to zero because the trust infrastructure, the payments, the reviews, the dispute resolution already exists. That's the platform thesis working exactly as designed. It also means the thing you're actually curating gets harder to curate. Vetting a bedroom is a physical, bounded problem. A room either exists or it doesn't. Vetting 10,000 independent massage therapists and photographers across 260 cities is a trust problem with no fixed shape, and trust is the only thing this entire business is actually selling. So where does the money go on the way out the door? The largest and least visible cost is protection. AirCover, Airbnb's host guarantee and guest protection program, ensures damage and covers liability on properties the company doesn't own, involving people it has never met, in homes it has never inspected. Every claim, every dispute, every bad faith guest or negligent host is a cost the platform absorbs to keep both sides showing up. Then trust and safety. Identity verification, fraud detection, and content moderation at a scale that spans 220 countries, each with different documentation standards and different ideas of what a safe stay looks like. Extending that same verification system to a photographer or a massage therapist under the services banner isn't free. It's the same infrastructure, rebuilt one new category at a time. Then marketing. Unlike a ride-hailing app where demand is often already standing on the sidewalk with an arm raised, a spare bedroom in a residential neighborhood has to be discovered. Airbnb spends heavily to make sure its listings are the ones showing up first, and that spend rises every time the company enters a category, like hotels or car rentals, where established players already own the search terms. Then compliance. And this is where Airbnb's cost structure genuinely diverges from a platform like Uber's. Uber's regulatory exposure runs through a relatively small number of national and state labor frameworks. Airbnb's regulatory exposure runs through thousands of individual city governments, each one free to write its own rules about zoning, registration, and who's allowed to rent out a home for a weekend. There is no single classification fight to win. There are thousands of local ones running simultaneously, forever, and every one of them requires its own legal read, its own registration system, its own local government relationship, which brings us to the clause the entire business is actually built on top of. A shopping mall's biggest risk is that an anchor tenant leaves. Uber's biggest risk is that a legislature redefines what its drivers are. Airbnb's biggest risk is blunter than either. A city can simply decide the market shouldn't exist inside its limits at all. New York City's Local Law 18 didn't reclassify anyone or cap a fee. It required hosts to live in the unit during a guest stay, capped occupancy at 2 guests, and banned whole apartment rentals outright. The result, according to figures Airbnb itself has cited in lobbying against the law, was that roughly 92% of the city's listings simply went offline. Not fewer bookings, not lower fees. Gone. Barcelona went further. In 2024, the city announced it will decline to renew a single short-term rental license after 2028. No new licenses issued in the meantime. By the end of that year, an entire category of business, tens of thousands of listings, ceases to legally exist inside one of Europe's most visited cities. Keep this in mind if you ever think a growing platform is a safe platform. There's no ballot campaign that fixes this the way Proposition 22 did for Uber in one state. There's no single classification to defend. There are thousands of city councils, and Airbnb has to win the argument in every one of them, indefinitely, while losing badly in a growing number. So does owning Airbnb actually work as a business? The honest answer depends on which version of the platform you're actually holding, and the two versions barely resemble each other. In the optimistic scenario, the fee restructuring lands exactly as designed. Guests see cleaner pricing, conversion keeps climbing, and hosts absorb the new math because the alternative, listing nowhere, is worse. Experiences and services scale into genuine second and third revenue engines instead of side projects, and the Amazon for Travel bet turns Airbnb into the default app for anything you need on a trip, not just the bed you sleep in. AI agents handle the booking friction that used to cost the company in customer support, and margins expand from the software side, not the fee side. In the realistic bad year, Barcelona stops being the exception and becomes the template. A handful of major tourist cities follow its lead, and each one doesn't shrink your business. It deletes an entire market overnight with no negotiation and no fee adjustment that fixes it. Hosts who watch their take go from 3% to 15.5% start comparing options, and a competitor charging an effective 8% starts looking a lot more attractive. The service's expansion runs into its trust problem at scale. A bad actor in the vendor network becomes a headline, and unlike a bad Uber ride, which is a contained single-city story, a trust failure on a platform whose entire pitch is "we vet the stranger for you" doesn't stay contained. It reaches every category the app has expanded into because the brand promise was never really about bedrooms. It was about believing the platform's judgment of character, and that judgment either holds everywhere or it starts to look shaky everywhere at once. Both versions are running on the same 8,000 employees and the same booking engine. The difference isn't the technology. It's whether the thing being sold, trust between two people who've never met, holds up as the platform stretches it across more categories and more cities than it was ever originally built to cover. A shopping mall owner rents you a room they own. Uber sells you a decision made in a fraction of a second by an algorithm you're not allowed to see. Airbnb sells you neither. It sells you someone else's front door key, left under a mat you've never seen, backed by a stranger's promise and a company's guarantee that the promise will hold. Airbnb doesn't own a single home. Airbnb owns the moment you decide to believe it will be fine, and that moment multiplied by 500 million nights a year is worth more than any building it could have bought instead.